Yo people, this video is sponsored by Squarespace. That's where you go for a website. Anyway, more on that in a bit. Let's do it. Yes, the people, welcome to the video. So, depending on where you are in the world, gyms may either be open now, if you're very lucky,
I'm in a glass case of emotion,
or about to be open, hopefully at some point in the not too distant future. Now, unfortunately, here in the UK, we are still waiting on a confirmed date, but you know, I think it's going to be soon, mate, because you know, everything else is open. Pubs are open, I think zoos are open, ice rinks are open. I don't know if that's true. No one's going on an ice rink in the summer in England anyway. You get the point, right? It's going to be soon, and so I thought I would just put a video out going over some maybe useful tips and hints and considerations to make that transition back into that gym life all the more seamless, so we can optimize those gains, optimize the regaining of gains when we actually do get back into the gym. So that's what today is going to be about. Now, obviously, you might just be sat there thinking like, what are you on about? I'm just going to go back to the gym, Joe. I'm not going to think about it, mate. I'm just going to walk in, get on the bench press and like carry on as if nothing ever happened. That is obviously a perfectly legitimate approach. However, this video is for those of you who maybe want to be a bit more tactical, you know what I mean? Have a bit more like purpose and direction in your approach to getting massive and shredded. So that's what this video is for. Let's do it. So I'm going to start with training and come to nutrition later. There's a couple of main points to mention. I will start with the bad news. You are going to eat a lot. It's going to be the worst DOMS you've ever felt, like never before, or maybe like equivalent to when you very first started the gym. When you first started the gym and you went in and did like chest workouts consisting of like 9 direct chest exercises, you know what I mean? Bruh. Like flies and presses at incline, flat and decline, plus cables, plus dips. Next day you woke up, felt like your chest was gonna fall off. That's what it's gonna be like, mate. And I understand that some of you sick bastards out there do enjoy that. Kind of admit I enjoy that too. It's kind of nice in a certain weird way, innit? However, I'm gonna work off the assumption that the majority of people don't wanna feel like they've been trampled by a hippo after the first session back. So we're gonna work towards trying to mitigate our DOMS, our delayed onset muscle soreness, as much as we can, because aside from the actual ache in itself, you don't want it to impact your training, do you? That's probably the bigger issue. Now, one thing to mention about DOMS is that it's more exercise specific than muscle group specific, and what I mean by that is, let's say you've been doing dumbbell presses for the past 12 weeks, all of a sudden you go and jump over to some barbell presses. The likelihood that you're experiencing some DOMS after that is fairly high, right? Because although those exercises might seem very similar, and they are very similar in terms of the movement path, just the subtle differences in that might be enough to elicit some kind of DOMS afterwards, right? So if you've been lunging and doing split squats at home and then you think you can, you know, walk into the gym, do 5 sets of 10 on RPE, 9 on a leg press, your ass is going to be set on fire, mate. Now, some of this is inevitable and we're just going to have to live with it. However, there are probably a few things that we can do to both limit the DOMS and also limit the effect that DOMS has on the rest of our training. Number 1, taper up your training frequency. So as a lot of you might know, I usually stick to a full body training split. And in that split, although I don't do the same exercise on consecutive days, I certainly do hit the same muscle group on consecutive days. So I might do a bench press on the Monday, a chest fly on the Tuesday, and then back to a bench press, albeit at a different rep range, on the Wednesday. Now, if I haven't trained for a long time, I don't think this is going to be very feasible, because by the time I come around to my bench presses on the Wednesday, I expect the DOMS is going to negatively impact what I'm able to lift on that exercise and essentially how much I get out of that exercise. So what I would recommend, and probably what I will do myself, I mean, I suppose I should do what I recommend, is start with a training split with a lower training frequency per muscle group. So I might start with a push-pull leg split. If I was doing that, I could say do my pull workout. Let's say my lats are on fire, right? I've then got my push workout and my leg workout plus whatever rest days I take in between that time for those lats to ache, and I don't have to touch them with any more exercises. So it's not really going to inhibit any of my other exercises whatsoever. Number 2, gradually adapt your rep ranges. So even if we're talking about the same exercise, if you suddenly go from one rep range to another, you are likely to experience worse soreness. So let's say I have some dumbbells and I've been doing flat bench presses at home every day, whatever it is. Chances are most people don't have the kind of weight to do any kind of low reps. So most of us generally will have been doing fairly high reps. Let's say I've been doing sets of 12 to 15 on my dumbbell presses. If I then go into the gym and I think, fuck it, I'm gonna go heavy as I can, I'm gonna do sets of 5 or sets of 6, because that's such a difference in weight and a difference in rep range, it's likely gonna make me ache a lot more. I would personally recommend that you pace yourself a little bit more, gradually come down in reps. So if you've been doing reps of 12 to 15, I would say as a minimum, do sets of 10. And that works both ways. If you've been doing particularly low reps for some reason, then jumping straight back in, even on the same exercise with very high reps, is probably gonna elicit more DOMs. Number 3, take more rest days than usual. That's fairly obvious, I suppose, when talking about just pacing yourself in general, but I will come to why we can get away with that a bit more later. Save your big compounds towards the end of your training week. So if you're lucky, you might have been playing around with some dumbbells, you might have somewhere to do some tricep dips, maybe some pull-ups, whatever it is, but very few of us, I think, have enough weight or floor with the kind of structural integrity required to have been deadlifting at home, right? And so I understand that maybe a few people miss deadlifting, they want to get back on the platform and pull some decent weight, right? By all means, go for it. But if you're going to do that, I would personally say try and hold off until towards the end of your training week, or let's say you're going to rest over a Saturday and Sunday. I would try and hold off with those big lifts like your squats and your deadlifts until later in the week, because otherwise, let's say you get DOMs from doing some bench pressing, right? It's fine. Your chest's out of action, so you avoid whatever chest exercises, or you do them just at a suboptimal level. If you go in and you do your deadlifts and then you experience DOMs from that, it's going to affect your whole lower body, possibly part of your arms and your entire posterior chain, right? That might put you out of action or massively affect a lot of other exercises you're going to do. So just for a couple of weeks, I would try and put your deadlifts, even your squats, and any other exercises that you experience a lot of DOMs off towards the back end of your training week. So the key message here, this is a key point in the whole video, right? Everyone gather around, right? Key point, start with chest, mate. I'm kind of joking, but I'm kind of serious. So let me just move on to the second bit of bad news, and then eventually we'll come to the good news. Your potential for getting injured is going to be higher. You know, if you've had 3 months off the gym, or even just 3 months on a very limited split doing whatever exercises you can do at home, and then you go back in, start doing your compound exercises again, fact is, it's pretty much common sense, you're probably more prone to getting injured. And I don't mean that just purely from a strength perspective. Now, that is one thing. Obviously, I don't think anyone is enough of a moron to go in and immediately start trying to deadlift the exact same amount as you were deadlifting on the day that gyms closed down, right? If you do that, then I don't know, it's wild, isn't it? It's crazy. I won't say you deserve it, because no one deserves it, but it's close, like. Anyway, aside from the actual strength and the potential for you to like try and overdo it in terms of the weights you're using, it's also a case of like maybe you have to relearn the motor skill again. You know, you have to retune, rehone the actual movement path, because it can take a long time to dial in your squat perfectly or dial in your deadlift perfectly. And if you've had a long time off it, just be cautious of that. Obviously go in lighter, do more warm-up sets, and maybe spend some time just practicing your form before you go, you know, what's the term? Is it gung-ho? Gun-ho? Gun? You know, start fisting it, right? You know what I'm saying? All right, on to the good news, and this really is good news, right? There's this thing, and it's called muscle memory, or at least that's what it's commonly known as, right? And I could stumble awkwardly through the science behind it. However, I have this policy where I just try not to say words that I don't understand. So I'm just gonna give you the general gist, right? This is overarching layman terms. You regain muscle faster than you gained it in the first place. So obviously there are exceptions to that. Like let's say you first gained muscle when you were like in your peak lifting years, when you're 18 years old, and then you took 50 years off the gym and came back when you were like 70 and thought, all right, I'm just muscle memory, bro. That's not gonna happen, mate. However, for most of us young, healthy people, this is good news, right? Because it means that we're able to get away with a lot of those things we mentioned earlier about mitigating the soreness and reducing the likelihood of injury, whilst still being able to actually make good, significant progress. So this is pretty convenient actually, and it just reinforces the whole point of the video, which is you don't have to dive back in, going all crazy as if you got 4 weeks to train for Mr. Olympia, right? You don't need to match the training volume and intensity that you were doing on the day gyms closed in order to be able to make progress. And that's really the only takeaway you need from this, at least in terms of training, although psychologically that should also be quite a boost, because now we can all like at least shit ourselves less about all the gains we lost. I actually didn't lose any because I'm a sick fuck, but whatever. Now, more broadly speaking, I of course always recommend that people follow a training program just if they want to get the most out of the time spent in the gym. However, consider that if you are going to do that and you do have a plan to start on day one of gyms reopening, then you might have to just factor in a few more rest days and some slightly reduced intensity than normal. All right, let's move to the nutrition side of things. Now, as ever, this is going to be somewhat goal dependent. Like, if you're fat, eat less. If you're skinny, eat more. That's like the general advice, whether or not you're training, whether or not you have access to the gym, of course. However, we do have to work with some kind of assumptions, otherwise the video ends up being so broad that it actually helps no one, mate. So I'm gonna make the assumption that maybe you've gained a little bit of fat, lost a little bit of muscle. Maybe you've gained a lot of fat, lost a lot of muscle. Maybe it's only a bit and it's barely noticeable, but most of us will have done some kind of fat gain and some kind of muscle loss to some extent. I think we're pretty safe in assuming that. So the first thing to say is, if you're going from no gym to gym, then regardless of what your diet is like, you're gonna make some progress, right? If you've been living that Pringles and turkey dinosaur lifestyle, right, whilst not training at a gym, and then you go back to training at a gym, but you know, you're really like invested in the Pringle lifestyle, you're still gonna make some progress, right? If your diet doesn't change whatsoever, just the new training stimulus is going to have some kind of impact on your physique, right? That's ideal. And that would be the case regardless, but it's even more true due to that muscle memory factor making us more responsive to training than we would usually be. So does that mean we should not really pay attention to our diet? Well, that's a legitimate option, mate. No one's forcing you to do anything. However, I think if you're watching this video, then you're probably like willing to put like slightly above the absolute minimum level of commitment in. Like you got this far, man, you're watching the video. So the course of action that I would recommend probably depends on how good or how bad your training has been, right? If you have a decent home gym setup or access to some underground gym that you've been, you know, breaking lockdown in or whatever the case may be, right? If you've been on course, your training's been decent and you're still like making progress towards whichever goal you are trying to work towards, then obviously crack on as normal. Don't listen to me. Probably switch the video off now, to be honest. It's probably a bit pointless. You know, the advice would be the usual advice. Like if you want to cut, then 500 calorie deficit. If you want to make some gains, then a 200 to 300 calorie surplus, you know, crack on. However, if your training has been an absolute bag of dicks and you are under the umbrella of assumptions that we put forward before, you know, you've gained a little bit of fat, lost a little bit of muscle, then it may be worth attempting the elusive recomp, i.e. building muscle and losing fat simultaneously. Now, I use the term elusive because this isn't particularly feasible for most of us most of the time, at least not to any meaningful extent. And it's only really in very specific conditions that this is possible, and there could be a few reasons for that, right? That could be you're on gear, mate, you're hammering the test and the tren and whatever, right? And so you are very responsive to training, right? It could be that you're an absolute newbie, right? You never lifted a weight before, and so you touch it for the first time and your body's like, shit, what's this, mate? Better grow some muscle. Or it could be because there was just a global fucking pandemic and you couldn't get to the gym for like 3 or 4 months. You see where I'm going? And so it's not often that you are actually in the position that a recomp might be feasible, and I think that if we do find ourselves here, then we might as well try and make the most of it. So for a lot of people, it's probably worth just trying to get the most out of your gym sessions. And just side note, getting the most out of your sessions doesn't necessarily mean putting the most in terms of like energy, all out, flat out, trying to kick its head in. Does that make sense? But it's probably worth doing that, focusing on your training and just keeping your calories somewhere around maintenance. If you float around there and keep your protein high, then you certainly stand a pretty good chance of recomping, at least for the first month or two before you actually regain some gains. The progress slows down and you have to choose between bulking or cutting like a normal person. So that's what I'd recommend for most people, and it's probably a nice easy way of easing back into things. Can you say ease twice in a sentence? Whatever, man, fuck it. I'm a rogue, mate. Now, if you've been overeating a bit, then you're probably hoarding some good glycogen stores, nice and full. And so you can probably get away with going a little bit lower in carbs without it having any kind of detrimental effect on your training sessions. However, you do have to factor in the difference in energy requirement between what your sessions will have been like at home, if there were any, and then what they will be like in the gym. Obviously, they're going to be a lot more taxing in the gym, both in terms of training and recovery. So to take a generic example, let's say you weigh 170 pounds and your maintenance calories is around 3,000, right? I would probably recommend eating between 2,800 and 3,100 calories. So somewhere just below or at maintenance. Then I'd go high-ish protein, 1 to 1.2 you could push it a little bit higher if you want. Grams of protein per pound body weight, so that'd give you 170 to 204 grams of protein. Keep your fats around 75, maybe 80, and then fill the rest of your calories up with carbs. Now, of course, you can't continue to get bigger and leaner simultaneously forever. So I don't really have any idea of how long you would be able to continue making progress in terms of a recomp, right? It might be a month, it might be 2 months, it might be a little bit longer, it might be even less. At some point you will notice that your progress slows, and again you have to revert back to the more traditional cut or bulk phases, and that obviously depends on where your physique is at the time. Where your physique is at the time, whatever. You know what I'm saying? Alright, finally, I'm just gradually getting closer to this camera. Oh, yeah. Alright, finally, I just want to reiterate, or even say it for the first time, just a main general point for everyone out there, right? If you've fallen off the wagon a bit, don't worry about it, mate. You know, a lot of us have. It's fine. I mean, I say us, I'm just trying to make you feel better. I haven't, obviously, you know what I mean? But it's fine, right? Don't worry about it. You can rise from the ashes once more, my friend. You can unleash yourself from the shackles of sloth and gluttony, yeah? You can become a sick fuck once more, or for the first time if you've never been one. But what I'm saying is, right, to borrow a cliche out of the cliche handbook, that's the thing. It's not a sprint, mate. It's not even a marathon, right? If we're gonna roll with the analogy, it's not even a Ironman triathlon, right? It's not a super marathon, if that's what they're not called that. It's not the thing that David Goggins does, right? It's a 6-month trek through the Himalayas, mate. It's circumnavigating Borneo on a pogo stick, right? It's trekking from the source of the Amazon to the mouth with a mildly obese goat on your back, right? It's long, that's what I'm trying to say. It's the result of long-term shit, right? It's more like the Shawshank Redemption than a Rocky montage, do you know what I mean? You understand what I'm saying? So, you know, even if gyms aren't open right now, you can start getting in good habits, right? You know, you can track your macros every other day. You can start weighing yourself, just even if you're not trying to go anywhere, just to get some kind of grasp on it, start measuring shit, right? You can start taking your creatine, mate. You can write out a little plan for yourself for when you get back to the gym. You know, you can just do shit, mate. Just get back on the upward spiral, you know, get inspired, not by me. I'm not that inspiring. I'm sat in my bedroom in a vest with cottage cheese on it, but you can't really see. So that's my video. See you later. Thanks again to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. If you need a website, whether it's a domain or a blog or an online store, you can head to Squarespace and get started with making your own unique website, even without any prior knowledge of web design. It's as easy as selecting one of their many templates and then tailoring it to your needs and preferences. Each one has customizable content areas where you can insert content blocks from pictures and videos to blog posts, products and social links. Then you can edit the finer details like fonts, colors and page configurations with the style editor tool. There's also loads of useful features like their built-in SEO tools, for example, that enable you to make sure your website gets ranked higher in search engines and ultimately means more traffic. So if you want to give it a try, you can head to squarespace.com to start your free trial, and then squarespace.com/Joe Delaney to get 10% off your first order when you're ready to get started. Alright people, we out. Ciao ciao. Sayonara.
They see me rolling. They hating. Joe Delaney is my hero.